Money is the root of evil everywhere you go. But nobody have any objection to the root now.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Thomas Blue, and I'm an amateur magician. I did have the privilege of sitting with Vernon for 6 years at the Magic Castle almost every night. And Vernon and I would talk. And my real love was the gamblers and gambling. Even though I was very heavily into magic, Vernon and I actually spent most of our time talking about he would either be telling me his stories, or if I asked a question, it was always about the gamblers. Anyway, one of the things that we always talked about was who was Erdnase. Jeff Busby and Bart Whaley wrote a book called The Man Who Was Erdnase, and they championed the hypothesis that Erdnase was Milton Andrews, the murderous gambler. Well, Vernon almost had conniption fits thinking that Erdnase was a murderous gambler. So Vernon had some criteria. He said, first, the man was going to be extremely educated. Second, he was more than likely going to be English, or possibly Canadian. But Vernon was pretty sure that the man was not Australian or New Zealand. And his last criteria was that he couldn't have been a murderous gambler. He had to be a good person at heart, because he's exposing all these tricks, and he's doing it as a love. Most of the tricks, most of the techniques that Erdnase had devised were his own doing. He wasn't taught by anybody else. Basing this on some of the words used in the text of the expert at the card table, such words as disabuse. This is a word that is not used very often in the vernacular of Americans. Possibly the English upper crust would probably use it, but more than likely it was, Vernon thought the man was either a lawyer or a scientist. And so I'm here to give you the person that I am championing as Erdnase. My person is very, very close to E.S. Andrews. It's W.S. Andrews. Now, here's a picture of the person, and this is his obituary in the New York Times. William Symes Andrews, and he was employed by Edison and eventually worked for General Electric Company. He died in his home in Schenectady, New York. He was 82 years of age. The obituary goes on to say that Mr. Andrews was 7 months younger than Mr. Edison. He was born on September 10th, 1847, at Salford, England, a son of Bailey and Selina Andrews. He attended Kersner Collegiate Academy. Where he showed mechanical talents and a ready understanding of scientific and electric matters. Upon graduation, he became an instructor in the academy, so though he was he became an instructor of electrical engineering. Well, that takes care of Vernon's, that Erdnase had to be either a scientist or a lawyer. Upon graduating, he became an instructor in the academy, and through his scientific knowledge, he became the headmaster of the school at age 18. In 1875, he went to Toronto to enter the firm of Ray-Bond and Company, manufacturers of firearms and sportsmen's accoutrements. 2 years later, he established a branch factory for the firm at Newark and was made superintendent. For you investigators of Erdnase that will carry on after me, Ray-Bond is a Toronto company making sportsmen's accoutrements. Well, that's code for gambling paraphernalia. They later established a branch factory for the firm at Newark. Well, Mason and Company had a branch at Newark. That might be a starting point for some of the investigators. In November of 1879, he entered the employ of Edison at Menlo Park. Having read the newspaper of Edison's invention of the electric incandescent light, he assisted in winding the armatures of Edison's first dynamo, constructed the first Edison chemical electric meter, molds for carbonizing the filaments of the lamps, and finally small and delicate mechanisms for picking up the hair-like filament and placing it between platinum clamps for mounting. All of this technique of working very fine metalworking came from whatever he was doing for sportsmen's accoutrements. Well, I don't know. I don't think it takes a fine hand to thread a tennis racket. So I suspect that what he's doing is he's manufacturing dealing boxes. That's where the real work comes in. Anyway, early in 1881, Mr. Edison conducted a test of 600 of the electric lamps. His entire force was keyed up to a high pitch of effort during this test, which Edison first saw, and would decide the commercial efficiency of his lamp. Mr. Andrews' part was to watch the performance of certain control apparatus and regulate it as required. On that occasion, he worked for 50 hours without sleep. Andrews, in 1881, Andrews was made superintendent of the testing department at Edison Machine Works in New York. In 1883, he became chief electrical engineer of the Central Station. And finally, Andrews went to Schenectady in 1894 to make X-ray machines for General Electric. From 1897 to 1903, he engaged in X-ray testing, taking out a number of patents on methods of regulating X-ray tubes. He was also interested in illumination by phosphorescence and fluorescence. He was a fellow of the American Institute of Electrical Engineers and of the Illuminating Engineers Society, and a member of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the National Electric Light Association, the Franklin Institute of Philadelphia, the Historical Society. There's not much there other than a few circumstantial facts that would lead you to believe that it's Erdnase, other than one very crucial point. Remember, I said at age 18, he was made the headmaster of a boys' school in England. And this school was Kersner's Collegiate Academy at Beckington, near Bath, where he showed mechanical talents and a ready understanding of scientific and electrical matters. Upon graduating, he became an instructor. Well, he was born in 1848, and if you add 18 years to that, suddenly, in 1875, he goes to Toronto. He leaves being the headmaster of a boys. Well, that's very suspicious. Why would somebody, an academic, leave his academic world, give up a really cushy job, headmaster of a school? Most headmasters of boys' school in England at the turn of the century, they retired from that. What's suspicious here is there's only a handful of reasons why you would leave this cushy job. I suspect that for 10 years he was a headmaster of this school, but suddenly had to leave because something had gone wrong. I suspect that it was because he got caught cheating. Cheating at cards would be equivalent to anyway, terrible thing, getting caught cheating. So the researchers that will follow me should see if they could find anything about Andrews leaving England with a black cloud over his name and having to go to the province, to Canada, to get away and start a new career. And the career that he chose is probably metal worker and then electrical engineer. Electrical engineering in 1880 would have been right at the cutting edge. It'd be like becoming a computer programmer in 1950. Now, he really didn't want to disguise his name that much. He really wanted people to know who it was if he wanted to tell them. And all he did was he took the W from William and turned it sideways and made it E. Spelled the name backwards, and it turned out that S.W. Erdnase is how we know it. How I came to find William Symes Andrews is I bought a book, and here's the book. This is the first edition of Magic Squares and Cubes by Andrews. Well, this was published in 1908 by Open Court Publishing in Chicago. This is while he's working for General Electric in New York. So he does have some experience publishing books. But the name on it, W.S. Andrews, instantly caught my attention. At that moment, I knew I had found Erdnase. Years later, I bought it, the second edition. This is the 1917 edition of Magic Squares and Cubes. These two books, as far as I know, only came in these two editions, the first and the second edition. The copyright expired, and Dover picked up the copyright and has had it in print, I believe, ever since it went out of copyright. Thank you very much. I hope that the investigators that I inspire with this video will go on. Unfortunately, I won't be able to do this. So, good luck. Good hunting.